Our speaker this evening needs no introduction for sure. He is an ODK member.
A good Christian man, a good family man, a good father, and a good all-around man. Now, if I were to take time to tell you the many attributes he has brought about in his lifetime, I wouldn't have time to do it. It'd take 30 minutes at least.
He is currently serving as a governor of the U.S. Postal Service and is a member of the board of directors of South Central Bell Telephone Company, Provident Life and Accident Insurance Company, Hamilton National Bank of Knoxville, McDowell Enterprise Incorporated of Nashville, and Tennessee Natural Gas Lines.
A man is as great as the truth he speaks, as great as the help he gives, as great as the destiny he seeks, as great as the life he lives. 20th century history will record this man as one of the great ones, not only for his contributions in the field of education, but for the life he lives. To introduce our keynote speaker, Knoxville's roving ambassador, Dr. Andy David Holt.
Here.
Now, Ernie, if you have been wondering where I got this gay garb I've got on, my wife bought it for me. She wanted me to look like a cross between Bill Fortune and a maroon azalea.
Pea pickers, if ever there was a tough act to follow, you're looking at it. I wouldn't give that spot to my cleaners. But then again, Dr. Andrew D. Holt is a tough man to follow, period. I've been a fan of Dr. Andy for years, and if you folks will just sit back and relax, you'll see why most Tennesseans are proud to call this man a friend. Now, first of all, I'm not going to take up a lot of time listing Dr. Andy's accomplishments. That would take up to the rest of the show. If you want to see them for yourself sometime, just visit any University of Tennessee campus. Better still, drop on into Milan, Tennessee sometime and ask anybody about Andy Holt. There's lots of monuments and testimonials to UT's President Emeritus across this state. But I guess this is the way most people see and remember Dr. Andy. Since his retirement in 1970, Dr. Andy has shaken more hands than a preacher at a camp meeting and swapped more jokes than a politician on a courthouse square. The Andy Holt wit is known throughout the nation. Why, he can milk an introduction for all it's worth. You've probably heard his famous opening line several times.
Well, wasn't that a pretty introduction? Did you like that introduction? I did. And when Jack sat down and I stood up, you clapped. He couldn't tell whether you were clapping because he sat down or because I stood up. Now, in order that he may know that you think he gave me a perfectly beautiful introduction, you think he's doing a grand job, it's your chance to give him a round of applause. Now, when Hollis sat down and I stood up, you clapped. He couldn't tell whether you were clapping because he sat down or because I stood up. Now, in order that he may know you think he gave you a beautiful... Now, wasn't old Bill Fortune spread it on for me? Now, when Bill sat down and I stood up, you clapped. He couldn't tell whether you were clapping because he sat down or because I stood up. Now, in order that he may know that you think he gave me a terrific... Now, wasn't that a pretty introduction? Didn't you like that introduction? Now, when old Ben sat down and I stood up, you clapped. He couldn't tell whether you were clapping because he sat down or because I stood up.
There's just no topping the old Andy Holt humor. He's a learned man with a Ph.D. who once headed up one of the nation's largest universities, who is on the board of directors of over a half dozen major industries, and yet he can spin a yarn with the best of them. If Andy had been so inclined, he'd have made a first-rate comedian or maybe a singer. Maybe you folks have heard Andy tell the one about the fella who tries for 10 years to get a much sought-after Tennessee-Alabama football ticket. He finally goes to a ticket scalper.
Now, I don't know whether you got scalpers up here in this end of the state or not, but we used to have them. And that scalper charged a poor fella $250 for one ticket. It burned him up, but he had to see the game. So the next day he went to the game and sat down, and lo and behold, right next to him was an empty seat. Well, he looked at that empty seat and thought about that $250 he'd paid for that ticket and got hotter and hotter. Finally turned to the little old lady on the other side of him. She said, "Lady, could you tell me whose seat is it?" She said, "Yes, it's my husband." He said, "Well, why isn't he here?" She said, "He passed away." Well, that embarrassed him. He said, "Well, I'm so sorry. Please excuse me. I shouldn't have said that." But the seat was still empty. So after a while, they turned to her again and said, "Lady, don't you have any friends?" She said, "Yes, I have some friends." He said, "Well, why aren't some of your friends sitting in that seat?" She said, "They couldn't come. They went to my husband's funeral."
And have you pea pickers ever heard of Am beer? Well, Dr. Andy explains it in his joke about the stranger who stops his car and asks for a drink from the farmer's well.
So the fella got out and came on in with the farmer and took him down to the old spring house, reached up there and got that old gourd dipper off the rafter and dipped down into that cold spring bench and came up with a dipper of cold, fresh water. And the fella started to put it to his mouth. He got just up to his mouth and happened to look over at the chin of the farmer, which was covered with Am beer. Now, in case you city folks don't know what Am beer is, it's the overflow from chewing tobacco. And when he saw that Am beer on the fella's chin, he lost his taste for water, but he didn't want to embarrass the old fella, so he just turned the dipper around to the other side and drank out the other side. Well, when he got through, the farmer said, "Well, that'll be John Brown. So you're the first fella ever I've seen drinks out of the same side of the dipper I do."
And have you heard the one about the drunk and the absent-minded professor? Well, it seems the professor had just bought a grandfather's clock in a store.
And then the proprietor said, "Professor, would you like us to put the clock in the back end of your car?" That's when the professor remembered he didn't have a car. So he had to back up to that great big grandfather's clock. And he put it on his back, and he staggered out the door with it, and he stumbled down the street with it. As he did, it was inevitable that there'd be a drunk coming from the other direction. At least it's inevitable as far as this joke's concerned. And the drunk ran right slap dab into the old professor, knocked him down, and there he lay with that great big grandfather's clock up on top of him. Well, when he finally regained his composure, he looked up indignantly at the drunk and said, "Sir, why don't you look where you're going?" The drunk looked down at him and said, "Well, sir, why don't you wear a wristwatch like everybody else does?"
When Dr. Andy isn't making speeches, he's usually on his way to one. He's addressed audiences in every state and many countries of Europe and Asia. Probably his best-known speech is his Friendly Faces speech. If you haven't heard it, folks, you've missed something. It incorporates a lot of Dr. Andy's personal philosophy.
Well, now, if you'll agree with me that friendly faces set the tone of the universe, your next question ought to be, how do you go about getting a friendly face? Well, TV tells you. Use Pepsodent toothpaste. Then they'll show you the picture of a very shapely blonde in a tight-fitting bathing suit. I never did know why they had to put them in a tight-fitting bathing suit to show us their teeth. I guess they want to be sure we made a look at them, and we do. No, that's not necessarily a friendly face. That's a grinning face. And there's a difference in a grinning face and a friendly face. A hyena has a grinning face, but they're not very friendly, I understand. But you know, how you go about getting a friendly face? Well, only one way to do it so far as I know. That's to have a friendly heart. A heart that says to everybody, you are an important person, and I like you, and I want to help you, and I want to make you happy. That's a friendly heart. How do you go about getting it? Well, I think the easiest way is to start out by loving God. If you love God, you've got to love your fellow men, all of them. Now, that's the part I don't like. I won't love some of them. I don't have any trouble loving people who love me. I love my wife because my wife loves me. At least she told me she did before she married me. I haven't asked her since, but she hadn't told me she doesn't. I can love folks who love me. That's easy enough. Then I can love people who can do a little something for me. But you know, I still have a little difficulty loving folks who don't have my color skin, who don't belong to my church, who don't live in my community, just exactly my kind of people. If I've got love, I'll love them, particularly those who are unlovable. They need my love more than anybody else does. They're the ones I ought to give it to. Now, I'll tell you how I feel about you. It's the first time I've ever seen some of you. I hope I'll see you many times hereafter. But I'll tell you how I feel about you. If you like me and you like this speech I'm making, I like you. If you don't like me and you don't like this speech I'm making, you can go jump in the lake. That's the way I really feel, but if I love God, I got to love them all.
Well, that doesn't come natural to me to love people who are not lovable, people who can't help me, people who don't like me. That's the reason I have to have just a little devotional every morning. Not very much. I read a little bit in the Bible or some good religious literature just to make me do a little thinking I need to do. And then I have about the same prayer every morning. I start out by thanking the Lord for what he did for me yesterday. I'm going to have a lot to thank him for in the morning. I got to thank him for you. Because this is a wonderful audience. Really, I don't know if you knew how good you are as an audience. I got to thank him for allowing me the pleasure of talking to you. I got to thank him for Martha. I do that every morning. Why she lives with me, I don't know, but I'm glad she does. You ought to see my children and my grandchildren. Oh, by the way, I got some pictures here. I'll show them. Be glad to show them to you after the meeting's over. You know, and then after I get through the thank you section, I start in on my sin section, take up the sins I committed yesterday. Now, that takes a little bit longer. Well, really, I don't commit as many sins as I used to commit because there's so many sins require more energy than I now have. And the rest of them give me indigestion, so. Well, then after I get through that, I ask the Lord for one day. I don't want to strain him. I ask him for just one day to keep my motives straight for that one day, so that in the things I do and the things I say that one day, I'll be thinking about the other fella, not just about old Andy. You know, you ask any of these folks over here at this table, they know me well. All these older folks here know me well, and they are honest with you. They'll tell you I haven't got sense enough to be president of a great university like this one. The only reason I was able to hold it together was the good Lord enabled me to surround myself with people like these who did a tremendous job for this university. I guess the best advice I could give to a bunch of ODK members, old and young, and to their girlfriends and their wives would be every day keep in touch with that source of all love. If you do, you love God. If you love God, you've got to love your fellow men, all of them. If you love your fellow men, you'll have a friendly heart. And if you have a friendly heart, you're bound to have a friendly face. Thank you.
Certainly no face is friendlier than Andy's, and no heart is more sincere. You can feel a warmth just being around this man, and no one feels it more than Andy's beloved wife, Martha. Dr. Andy always jokes about using his wife's paper route to supplement their income. But what's really funny is what attracted him to Martha when he first met her at a planned luncheon party.
Well, when I got there, much was my disappointment to learn that she was a junior in high school and I was a college professor. A little difference in age of 10 years. But she had a way of raising her right eyebrow straight up without moving the left eyebrow. Well, I had courted a lot of women, but none of them had been able to do this, and this fascinated me. But then she was so young, of course, that I didn't think about her seriously for matrimonial purposes.
Well, old Romeo finally married Martha Chase with her arched eyebrow, and they had 3 children, and those children begat children. Now, when he's not pounding the rubber chicken circuit, Dr. Andy can usually be found at the old fishing hole with one of his 8 grandchildren.
Now, then we go around here to the far side. Put him on in while I'm fixing the shoestring. This is an unusual possession.
Oh, it feels like a big one.
Ah, that's good. That's good. Now, that's the stuff. Put him on in there. Good, nice. Look at that guy go. Pull him on in here. Put him on in here. Put him on up here.
Man.
Oh, boy, look at that. Isn't that a beauty?
Yeah.
God,
I knew a worm would make it.
yeah, that's a crackerjack. You did it.
Dr. Andrew D. Holt started as a teacher in West Tennessee and went on to become president of the National Education Association and later the 16th president of the University of Tennessee. During his 11-year tenure, the university's alumni giving tripled, expenditures for research tripled, enrollment tripled, and state appropriations quadrupled. Dr. Andy has been lauded in the halls of the state legislature, and tributes to his accomplishments have been read into the pages of the congressional record. Politicians have tried to lure him into the governor's chair, and through it all, Andy has remained the same warm, caring, and humble individual we all know and love.
I think he had a way of inspiring his people. I guess it's one of the things that most people in leadership roles wonder if they can ever pull off, but that Andy almost had no trouble. When you went to a staff meeting, it was not that you expected to be entertained, but you knew something good was going to come out of that, and you were going to come out feeling better than when you went in. And that's not always true in these days on meetings. You know, you don't always come out feeling better than you did when you went in. But Andy had a way of making that happen to everyone.
There is no secret to Dr. Andy's success. His philosophy is quite simple. It's something he learned from his mother.
But she kept on crocheting, and she looked up from her crocheting and said, "Son, folks in Milan wonder why I don't get old." Well, here it was, she was 88 years of age, but I never had thought about her getting old. She was always so busy doing things for other folks, crocheting booties for newborn babies, baking cakes for old folks, getting up clothes for poor folks. Got to where I was afraid to wear a decent suit home, because in a couple of days, Mother would start looking at it and say, "Son, that old suit looks pretty old, and Mr. So-and-so sure does need a new suit." Usually Mr. So-and-so would wind up in my new suit, and I'd leave town in his slacks. But she was always so busy doing things for other folks, I never had thought about her growing old. So I said, "Well, Mother, why don't you grow old?" She said, "Son, every morning, first thing, I pray a prayer." Said, "I pray the same prayer every morning for as long as I can remember." Well, I wondered what that prayer was going to be, because there were plenty of things she could have prayed for. She could have prayed for the Lord to make her rheumatism stop hurting so much. She could have prayed for him to make that old farm up at Gwynn Switch bring in a little more money. She could have prayed for him to make her the president of the Milan Garden Club. Plenty of things she could have prayed for, but she didn't pray for any of those. She said, "Son, every morning I pray. Oh, Lord, give me the opportunity this day to do something for somebody who needs my help." She said, "There's never been a day in my life the Lord didn't answer that prayer." And when you spend your life helping folks who need your help, you'll never grow old. Well, I hope that something like that is my philosophy of life. She had a very simple religious philosophy. She believed in God, and she felt that when you believed in God, the way you showed it was to love your fellow men. And if you love your fellow men, you will spend your life in service to them. And she did as much for other people as anybody I know. Well, I hope that that is my philosophy. That's the philosophy to which I aspire.
Dr. Andy usually realizes this aspiration as witnessed by one Norman Wilkerson, a former UT student who now teaches school in Virginia. Norman came to Knoxville with his wife and child and found he couldn't cash a check in order to buy groceries for his family. As a last resort, he went to the president of the university. Dr. Holt listened to Norman's story and then asked Norman to go for a ride with him.
So we met my wife and daughter, and he suggested that we follow him, and we went down to a store there on Cumberland, and he told me and my wife to select whatever we needed, regardless of the money cost. And he shopped with us. In fact, he got his own buggy there, and we went through the store, and he suggested several items. One of them I remember was a box of vanilla wafers, which he said that he used to eat when he was a boy, and I guess I've liked vanilla wafers ever since. And also he said Sharon should have some oranges. He had that in the back of his mind, and we got a great big sack of oranges there, and told Wanda to get some steak, but she wouldn't do it, and so we got what we needed, and Dr. Holt went up and paid for the food there. As we left, I couldn't hardly believe it. The events had gone so quickly that I just could hardly believe what was happening. And I do remember we went outside, and Wanda and Sharon went on with the groceries to the car, and he called me aside, and he said, "Norm, you know," says, "I say a prayer every morning that that I'll be able to help someone, and you've answered that prayer for today, and I've never forgotten those words. It's a fine man. It really is.
Andy Holt has been called one of the greatest politicians of an era, and certainly one of the greatest lobbyists of the mid-20th century. He has been acclaimed by state and city officials, from the governor on down to the dog catcher, for his many contributions to education in Tennessee and in the nation. People love Andy Holt. I'm Tennessee Ernie Ford. I'm people, and I love him too.